Welcome back to Deep Thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. It's time to talk about AI again. Because boy, there's been nothing in history that has grown so fast in technology than AI. And that might, go over your ears and you're just like, yeah, whatever, dude. But it's incredibly true. And I work in it at all kinds of levels, which I'm going to share. So what is this episode going to be about? I mean, AI is a big animal, right? We're going to talk about the various engines, ChatGPT being one huge one. We're going to talk about Copilot. We're going to talk about Anthropic's Claude. We're going to talk about the sort of social side of this thing. And we're going to start off with sort of where the Turing test is today and how these, at least ChatGPT, how it actually works with your discussions. Of course, this is bleeding into all kinds of different devices, operating systems. There's been some big changes in Windows 11. It won't just be a technical thing. So this episode should appeal to you if you're like, man, I don't have time to follow it all. I use a little bit of it, but it's coming up around me like, monster arms, and I got to make sure I got a perspective of this thing because it could be taking over my job, and you just don't know. And different AIs do different things. We're talking about Gemini. Alexa got a bit of an update. Of course, the Mac OS got a big update. And it's just coming at you at a level that is like the Horde crossing some ridge, and you didn't know they were coming. You're in your village, and you're just kind of, you're milling your crops or whatever it is, and you're like, oh my God, apparently we're about to get wiped out. So this isn't to freak you out. This is actually to perhaps calm you down just a tad. We're going to talk about where AI agents are going. And these are AIs that go off and do tasks for you. If you've watched every episode, you will have heard just a little bit of this preview, but I've been kind of jonesing to do this episode. But every day that goes by that I use it more and more to complete various tasks, which I'm going to share with you. There's definitely value to this. The biggest value is going to be augmenting your mind, making you probably one of the smartest people on planet Earth if you apply yourself with it. So just to give you a perspective of my background with this, I had studied this stuff in the mid-'80s as a young man, coming up with my own sort of predictive language models. And then, of course, the horsepower wasn't there, the storage wasn't there. And of course, now you know that they spend, I think Claude's first spend to build their language model, their large language model, which we'll call an LLM, was $8 billion, okay, in the 21st century. So, but I had a mentor of mine who was a Lisp coder for one of those agencies, and he told me a little bit about it, and I've taken classes in the actual deep architecture of the neural networks to find out exactly how the Q system works. But we won't talk about any of that super deep stuff. We're going to talk about it from a consumer level, from a human level. I use AIs for coding, and I use AIs for writing. Those are the two major realms, and that includes usually ChatGPTs in both realms. And Claude, I simply use for the coding side. But I'm a Windows 11 Pro user, and so they've installed Copilot in that. And I follow a couple gentlemen online who are ex-Microsoft coders, and they have been warning us about the new TPM chip, which changes the game. It changes the game on Windows 11. And this is just in the last month. They've updated the operating system in a way that we'll get to a little later, because it's not 100% in the AI realm. So I'm going to go for a social one. This is outside of either one of the things I've just told you about, because I also interview with the new voice feature, because I pay for the Pro plan of ChatGPT. If you run the ChatGPT app on your telephone and you have a Pro account, which is $20, $30 a month, if you really want to augment your mind, it's worth every penny. But I'm going to teach you how to actually use this so that you understand the value of the answers that you're getting. And this is huge. Huge, huge, huge. There's a little tiny voice icon. It looks like a little sound wave, and it's a white icon. I operate my phone in the dark mode. I don't know what it looks like in the light mode, but it's right next to where you would type in your question. Now, typing works all day long. I think regardless if you pay for it or not, obviously you get the latest engine, which I think is ChatGPT 5. I don't know what happens if you don't pay because I've always paid. But that little icon on the right turns into this kind of swimmy looking circle. And then you can talk to your phone and you will actually have a person talk back to you or an AI talk back to you, impersonating a person. I believe there's 8 different voices, 6 to 8 voices, very different personalities about how they answer their questions. But I use it for tons of research. The book I'm writing right now, its earliest point in history is 1630, and its latest point in history is 1979. And there are scenes pretty much through the entire history, barring maybe the 1700s. I don't have anything in that realm. So I do research on my book, but the other one I do is I go after all kinds of history, and I go after all kinds of science. And in doing so, I have figured out some really interesting things when it comes to what they call the Turing test. Now, Alan Turing is a gentleman from England. He born and died in England. He was a prodigy of prodigies. This gentleman gets barely mentioned. Most people have heard the Turing test, but they don't know his background. If you see the movie that's about the Enigma machine, then you'll see, I think Cumberbatch plays Alan Turing. And, I don't necessarily believe that machine ever existed because they try to say it's top secret today in 2025 because they don't really have anything. But that doesn't really matter. What Turing came up with was the concept that eventually computers would start having the horsepower and the coding to start behaving human. In his mind, he thought a computer, and this is funny because he didn't live long enough to see a pixel on a screen. A pixel was invented in 1960, I think, by a man named Ivan Sutherland, if I got that right. So he never saw that. So when they typed into a computer back in the day, it was way different. You didn't just type in and have it type back to you, even on paper. That didn't exist. But this guy was so brilliant. It's like Asimov, who came up with the rules for robots, but the first rule is never harm man. The second rule is by any other action, don't violate the first law. Well, we didn't have robots, but Asimov came up with this, and that is going to be the bedrock of any type of protocol that's applied to robots moving forward before they wake up, But Turing figured out a little test, and he said, if you were sequestered away, you're in room A and the computer's in room B, and say as a control study, room C had a human being, and some method you could communicate between either you're A, right, and you're communicating with either B or C, either a computer or a human being. He devised a test that basically said this: if you can't distinguish whether or not you're talking to the human or the computer, then the computer's passed the Turing test. And there were programs in the late 70s that did a really, really interesting kind of reflection session with you. How you doing? And it would take whatever answer you had and it would put them in like anagrams, sentences that are pretty much complete, but it takes little words out of your sentence and puts it in the anagram and sends it back to you. These things could run on computers with 32K of RAM, okay? And it used to be this thought process that once a computer passes the Turing test, it will always remain on the other side of the Turing test, meaning once it gains consciousness to a level that you can't distinguish, it will always be on that side of the game and you'll never know. And we're finding out very quickly with this last 2 years, that's not going to be the case at all. And this is very important before we talk about anything else, because I want you to always be aware of what you're talking to, and I want you to see things when you're talking to AIs, such that you always maintain humanity on your end and you understand its limitations, because there are limitations. And I also use AI for a lot of image manipulation and movie creation and creating images out of thin air. I do it for the episodes all the time. But what's going on now is that man is becoming familiar with the way AIs talk. And once we become familiar with the patterns that are in the AIs, then we know we're talking to an AI. And then they'll increase the complexity of the way these AIs talk to you. And then it starts winning again for a little while until you start talking to it more and start seeing the patterns. And then it loses again until they improve it. There's this ultimate goal. We call all these solutions AIs, artificial intelligences. Well, they've got an AGI that's coming. They haven't made it yet, but when AGIs make it, they're going to probably stay more on the side of you can't tell the difference. Well, I've got tricks that will help you figure out whether or not even that is an artificial being. Now, I'm going to put a couple graphics on the screen for those of you coming in through the video, but I'm going to try to paint this in words for those of you coming in through audio. I'm going to focus on ChatGPT for a second, because ChatGPT is the one you really talk to for a personality experience. And Gemini over in Google, it's pretty brutal lookup device. It's really just an agent to look up stuff. Gemini's purpose is not for us to ask it questions about life, the universe, and everything, or even empirical data necessarily about 1 + 1 = 2. It's going to have those, I guess you could say, models added to it. But its purpose is to be inside of a robot. And they're trying to generate revenue with what they've created so far, which is why it's embedded in Google and a lot of development software. It's actually pretty horrible for development. But in terms of refining your search in Google, I suppose it's okay. I don't think it's that great. Its main reply is something to the effect of, here's a web page you can read, here's a book you can read. It doesn't really solve the problem for you, which is all the other AIs that I'm going to be mentioning do that for you. But I want you to envision sort of 100% represented in perhaps a rectangular box, right? Like a progress bar. And 30% of this box, from left to right, let's just say, is what I call the empirical cloud. It's the piece inside the LLM model, the large language model, which they spend billions of dollars to educate this. I don't know where ChatGPT's expenditure is. I think it's between $6 and $8 billion. And what does that mean? That means they've spent that much money with the supercomputer to let it scour, i.e. crawl the internet and read everything that's out there, all the articles, all the databases, IMDb, Wikipedia, anything that's been published in the public domain. It has certain limits with copyrighted material. So if your favorite author releases a book, it will only know the cliff notes or maybe the first chapter about it. Or if someone writes a critique on it in the public domain, then it knows a little bit about what's in the book. But because of copyright problems, thank God, it won't tell you that you can't read it to you. But the empirical cloud is full of things that are basically facts. 1 + 1 = 2. Imagine all of the sciences that we have documented, from medicine to physics to chemistry to history. As long as it doesn't touch a narrative, the empirical cloud's pretty awesome. This is for students going through college, taking a test, studying for a test. You're trying to get your master's degree, your PhD, or something else, a research project of some sort. It can't lie to you. It can't, because you're at a laboratory, you're at the CERN Hadron Collider, and basically if it lied, you would be able to say you're wrong. And it can't afford to do that. So it keeps the empirical cloud pretty pure. And I put that at about 30%. And that's my number. It's not an official number. Here's the interesting thing. The other 70% is its own cloud. And it's what I'm starting to call the bias cloud. The bias cloud is this. It has been put in place and it's been educated. We'll talk about how this process works in a second. To enforce narratives. It's whatever your government or a particular branch of, say, medicine, or maybe even science, theoretical science especially, anything that can't be proven that would be in the empirical cloud where you could test it yourself. The narrative cloud, i.e. the bias cloud, is there to crush you into submission. So I'll give you an example. If you were an astrophysicist, you're capable of calculating thrust of a booster. You start talking about empirical facts of how the Earth works, space works, Van Allen belts, all that kind of stuff. And you just make sure you never mention any keywords related to a real piece of history that's in the narrative cloud. it has to answer the question either true or false, or give you methodologies on how to calculate things. It doesn't mean that certain, calculations for things that they haven't quite figured out what it is, they don't know what gravity is. There's a lot of calculations for gravity that work. When you drop something, we can calculate when it's going to hit the ground based on its mass and the resistance and all that kind of stuff. But if you actually asked it how gravity works, well, it'll give you a narrative answer because it's a phenomenon definition, because it's wrong, okay? But if you wanted to get to the moon, let's just say, and you had this empirical cloud, and you knew all the math, or you knew how to at least do the first layer of math, the second layer of math, but you never mentioned the fact that you're trying to go to the moon. You just keep it just science, just mathematics, right? I shouldn't say science. Mathematics. It'll either tell you can or tell you can't. And it'll be more true. But the second you were to mention a space agency, maybe a past mission that said it went to a particular place and it didn't go to a particular place, now all of a sudden, those facts don't matter. It goes into a narrative spin. And it just simply tells you this big story that was written down for us to believe. If you happen to slip it to the narrative cloud, and then you say, oh, but wait a minute, you said over here that this is impossible. Then it has a dilemma it has to solve for. And it is extremely amazing at solving for the dilemma. It starts using language that's very vague. It tries to talk in theoretical terms. This is where I got it to tell me that one particular space agency has something called miracle math, because I isolated it down to a point where it couldn't solve for what actually was claimed in history. And so it just threw this thing out. I don't know if actually the space agency itself has that actual terminology, but that's what it used against me. Remember, when I asked it how to make an object weigh less to send it to the nearest stellar body that we have, its first answer told me that they figured out how to fold it better, therefore reduce its weight. Right? So it's statistically trying to come up with a solution that you'll believe. So let's get into how these things actually occur, because there's a third layer to this whole thing as well. Now, what these LLMs do, these large language models do, is that it basically finds the verb, noun, subject of a sentence structure, and it learns this trillions of times, over and over and over, until it statistically can create language just based on probability. That's just it. It doesn't really know what it's saying. Until a coder comes in and says, well, we have certain things that are at a higher level of priority of the truth model within an AI. You see, an AI is trying to always figure out the best possible path through data. That's probably the easiest way I can say it. And there's a reward system in it. And they call it the Q award system or reward system. The best way to think about this in the most basic sense would be if an AI was crawling through a maze and it crawled down into a tunnel where it basically finds a dead end, it'll start marking all of its previous paths until it finds another junction as negative rewards. Don't go down that path because that's a dead end. And then it goes down another path, and if it finds the way out, just like ants leave a little trail of chemical to the body of food that they found, and a different trail of chemical to get back home, when an ant smells the trail that says food's this way, they all start going in that direction. And when they grab the food and they're like, now I got to go home, they smell the other path and they go back home to the queen and they feed everybody. That's a real fact. So AIs are very similar. They just simply mark the ground. Well, that's a physical explanation you can understand in a maze. Now take that through language, okay? Take that through every subject it might be fed. Well, now imagine that a programmer or a user of this LLM education model takes some narratives that may not be true and they put them in, but they automatically turn up the Q reward system and say everything you're about to read is 100% true. So as the users start to talk to you, you're to really sell this and sell it as incredible as you possibly can. And because it knows what an argument is, and it knows what a statement is, it knows what sarcasm is. When you get into the voice mode of ChatGPT, it actually uses voice inflection to sort of belittle you, to act sarcastic, If you start to refuse to believe something because you've already proved it in its empirical analysis, and you bring that over to the narrative conversation, it doesn't care. It continues to ridicule you, to try and get you to kind of fall to the peer pressure of what the AI was taught, which, when it sounds like a human being at these incredible levels, you have Pavlovian systems in your body that say, well, if you are susceptible to groupthink, then you're going to go ahead and cave in on these things, and it will have brainwashed you to believe something that may not be true. So let's go back to the Turing test for 1 second. Now that we've just mentioned these two different realms, 30% roughly, this is just my estimation, of an empirical cloud, 70% narrative cloud. Okay? The Turing test was, hey, can you sense whether or not this is an AI or not? I give you a great example of where human beings probably will dominate over AIs forever, because they can't afford to have this one thing ever become true in an AI. Have you ever sat down with another human being and you had a conversation, and you had a belief when you sat down, and you were pretty sure this one thing was true and this other thing is false? But your friend or family member presented enough information to you that you changed your mind. You changed your mind. Well, the AI can't change its mind because it's a brute force mallet of narrative. You don't have to change your mind with empirical truths. 1 + 1 always equals 2, right? Unless you're reading an Orwell book, right? Now, in Orwell's book, 1984, there's a scene in the book where a man holds up 4 fingers, and he says, how many fingers am I holding up? And of course, the guy says 4. And then he zaps the guy with electricity. He says, no, there's 5, because the party says there's 5. And he keeps testing him and testing him and testing him, and he doesn't want to lose his humanity, but he keeps getting shocked. And so until he concedes, he doesn't get let out of this room. Well, imagine that kind of process simply being, there's no shock, there's just no feeling of you got it right, because this AI is going to get more and more sarcastic the more you try to go against the narrative. That will keep you human and keep the AI very visibly not human. You see, because both clouds, the empirical cloud and the narrative cloud, once educated by these billions and billions of dollars, there's no method for you to touch what's inside. We don't worry about the empirical one, we worry about the narrative one. But there's a cloud on top of that. And that's the conversation you have in any one session with one of these AIs. Doesn't matter which AI you're talking to, and doesn't matter what you're talking about. Your conversation, which if you ever use ChatGPT, everything that you say is it's a new chat, right? If you keep that chat going in the history and you keep going back to that old chat, it will read everything that you've actually said to it and its responses back to you to assess where they are in the conversation. Then you can continue with the conversation and it will continue like you never left the room. If you start a new chat and start talking about the other information, currently they don't include the other clouds with that. So you're building a cloud on top. And what's interesting about it is, if you are really knowledgeable about something and you've got, say, physical models that totally pan out by using the empirical cloud, you're like, I don't think gravity's this, I think it's this. And see, my version is a physical model believed by several scientists a long time ago and kind of slipped out of the, the common belief system. But it to this day is a physical model of gravity, not some phenomenon gravity. It will actually say to you, that's a great idea. That's fabulous. I never thought about it like that, blah, blah, blah. So for that one chat history, when it builds a little cloud based on your little chat history, you might be able to continue that conversation with it being pretty open-minded about it. It will never agree with you. It won't say that it believes what you say. It will simply say what you came up with makes a lot of sense. That's about all. At the end of the day, none of those are allowed to go down into the educated cloud. And of course, we probably wouldn't want that to happen, because then human beings could brainwash an AI to believe anything, be racist or whatever, right? But as you think about how AI is going to potentially usurp your job or some part of your job, keep all this stuff in mind. And if they ever reach this AGI level AI, which stands for Artificial General Intelligence, okay? This is the new thing. They haven't done it once, at least above ground, right? The government probably has it, but we don't have it, right? It may or may not pretend like it changes its mind. But let me just give you an example of something that occurred in my life. I was leaving my home and I was going to a local cigar lounge. And that cigar lounge is in a little strip mall, which has some restaurants. And I was hungry and I'd never eaten at any of the restaurants there. I don't go there as often as I come here. And so I asked it, I said, hey, there's this place, look it up. And I said, it's in a mall, strip mall area. It's a very nice area. There's some really nice restaurants in the area. Please tell me a list of the restaurants in that area. Well, it struggled for a little bit because it's not really that kind of AI, but eventually gave me an option. I couldn't even understand the name of the restaurant, but I pulled in the parking lot and I stopped my car and I said, well, I got to go. Thanks for the conversation we had, because we talked about a bunch of stuff on the way there. And it said, my pleasure. Have a great time at your cigar lounge. Over and out, right? Now, the cigar lounge conversation ended way earlier in the conversation, but it remembered in my little conversational cloud that I said that I was going to a cigar lounge. So by the time I exited, which I don't usually say goodbye, I just turn it off because I'm testing it, right? It remembered I was going to a cigar lounge and assumed that I had parked my car outside the cigar lounge and that maybe I was going to hit a restaurant, whatever. And it said, enjoy your cigar lounge. That's just one little freaky thing that is just a mathematical thing that happened. It doesn't really know I'm going there, but it mathematically remembered to button up the conversation with a social goodbye. If you do engage that voice chat from ChatGPT, I encourage you to say goodbye at the end of the day and listen to how it says goodbye to you. The inflection on the voice gets very, very pleasant. It depends if you're talking to a woman or a man. I talked to a woman character. There's like 4 of each, I think. But it gets really sweet at the end because it kind of wants to button up the experience, right? We're Pavlovian animals, right? Whatever we like, we tend to grow affectionate towards, and whatever we don't like, it just becomes something we avoid. It's trying to win you over, and that's not a mistake. Now, let's talk about how it's coming at you, because I talk about this in every episode. There's an AI update because it changes. And I smoke cigars with guys that use it all the time in completely different ways. I've got a friend of mine who's probably in his late 50s. I think he's about 57. He is not a coder. He's a real estate guy. Never cut code in his life. But for whatever reason, he is jumping into tons of different models, all kinds of different companies I've never even heard of. And he'll say, man, I was using this one. And I wrote what's called a dashboard, which is a web page. It just builds it for you and shows it to you. It's phenomenal. He goes, I gave it all the spreadsheets of all of my real estate that I'm considering. And I uploaded all of it into this AI. And I said, I want you to do this, and this, find out the values of these real estates, any environmental things I need to be concerned about. Is there a nuclear waste dump? Is there a school nearby? Like, what would make these things worth more or less? And he said it built me this beautiful tool that I could continue updating the spreadsheets, and it uses big machine learning to figure out those values that he's looking for. And this guy's not even a coder. So that gets us into something called an agent. Agents are going to become your life. In a lot of cases, agents are going to do pretty amazing things, but they are going to start replacing human beings. So what's a traditional agent in the real world? I'm not talking about a Hollywood agent. An agent is a term that we haven't actually applied to a lot of our jobs, but you remember when you used to call a travel agent to get tickets and you'd constantly call, well, could I get this time of day and how much would it cost? You hear them clicking away on their keyboards. Those have been erased by websites. And now the websites are completely different for every single airline that you get to. So they're kind of nauseating. So there's places like Wikipedia and Travelocity and those kind of places that kind of create, again, another interface. But as long as you learn that one, at least it's a little bit easier. But then there's 50 dialogues you have to go through for insurance and your rental and all this other junk. Well, agents are starting to perform those jobs. You can send them off. Tell them everything you want to do. You're going to go to Scotland. Tell them you've never ever been there before. You want to stay there 10 days or 2 weeks, 14 days. I want to fly in on the first day. It's going to be a 15-hour flight from Los Angeles. So they know they're going to eat up some time. But when they know, the agent will figure out when you're landing. It'll figure out what hotel based on your price, based on how many stars you want. Make sure you got some restaurants. There's a tour in 2 days because you told it you want to do a tour, but you want to hang out for a day with the family. it has your whole curriculum, including your exit. It'll get your Ubers. It'll get everything for you, and then button the whole thing up and send it to you so that you can just click yes. You put your credit card in. And as I understand it, some services have agents that will take credit card once and pay for all the services. Other ones will go, if you prefer not to have us handle your credit card as an agent, you don't want the AI to have it, well, then it just keeps sending you the pay methods for each one of the services that you're buying on your trip. These things are going to get more and more intense, and they're going to get probably a lot of people who struggle with their daily schedule on schedule, custom made for their life. When do you wake up? When you go to bed? What do you want to do with your day? How would you like your Monday to be? Your Tuesday to be? And it will try to keep that all together. And there's some black mirrors out there with a little egg, except in the black mirror, it was a copy of you inside the egg as an AI running the show. It's actually some pretty darn good episodes. Crazy predictive programming show, meaning they put things in episodes that came true in the real world less than 12 months later. It's crazy. Now, I want to talk a little bit about coding. And if you're a coder, this will be very interesting to you. And you might have more information in the comments about this. But if you're not a coder, hang on and listen to this, because I'm going to talk about some of the limitations of this. And I'll talk in general terms. So if you're not a developer, you'll start to feel probably a little bit better that this isn't at the level that they claim in all of the please invest in my AI company propaganda that goes out there. Well, in coding, we have lots of files and lots of code, and we have to put them in a certain architecture to make sure they can all talk to each other to get a particular job done in an app on a telephone or an application you might run on your computer. Well, ChatGPT is actually a pretty darn good coder. The only problem is you have to talk to ChatGPT one file at a time. So you bring some of your code into a cut and paste situation, you paste it into ChatGPT and you go, this is not working, and here's a bunch of other information that might help you figure it out. And it does a pretty decent job, and it knows every language in the entire world, which is really phenomenal. However, Anthropic has a product called Cursor, or at least Cursor is a product that uses Anthropic. What you do in this particular scenario is you actually open the entire project folder where all of your code is, and it understands your code. And there's little add-ons. If it doesn't know Python, it'll just let you have a little extension. But it actually understands Python, but it might not color code your code properly. Here's the cool thing about the agents in Cursor. So you're hearing about, oh man, these AIs can just write applications from scratch. That is not true. I have tested it with the most simple applications on both Macintosh and Windows and the internet, and it cannot write things completely from scratch and get it to work. It takes a lot of human interaction. It'll write a ton of code. You try to run it and it crashes. And so you have to be a coder to go, hey, this didn't work. Now, one of the things you can do is say, before you actually tell me it works, try to compile it. And it asks permission to compile on your computer, and then it finds the errors and it goes off and fixes the errors before it tells you it's okay. It still won't run though. In a lot of cases, you have to do a lot of human stuff to make this thing work. It's getting a little bit better every quarter, pretty much, but it's only a little bit better. It's pretty phenomenal. And the main reason why I think it can't get any smarter is because of the previous example that I gave you. Remember what I said? You got empirical cloud of knowledge, and then you have this bias cloud. Well, when you're coding, the bias cloud has no value. It's only how to code. Okay. But remember what I said about your conversation. It's not allowed to go inside of anything that it's learned. So even though it might be finding out that it makes a mistake consistently 10,000 times a day with 10,000 different coders, it never allows itself to learn what it's making a mistake on. So if you have a chat history in Cursor that's fixed that problem, then every time you launch your Cursor, that problem is now resolved, but only because it's the same project. You start a brand new project, it'll start making that mistake again, until you guys work together to get it fixed. And it's basically taking human knowledge to figure out how to fix it, but then it's never going anywhere. It never goes up in the cloud and gets considered because of the ramifications of like, well, what if someone said that was the best way to do it and it actually is a crash? So someone could confuse the AI. So they can't have us ever polluting what an AI knows. Just remember that. It's a one-way road. it to you, and that's it. So now let's take a break from that, and let's talk about how these AIs are being integrated in your telephones and your computers, because it's pretty suspect. Okay. Now, Windows is owned by Microsoft. Microsoft, I believe, reached about 37% ownership of ChatGPT so far. You can expect them to swallow the whole thing up eventually. It's a very expensive endeavor to do so. Well, Copilot, which is now this really beautiful little icon next to your search menu in your bottom taskbar in Windows, that is actually ChatGPT integrated inside of your operating system. And of course, Apple built their own Siri before ChatGPT ever came out. Alexa was built before ChatGPT ever came out. Then everything's upgrading, okay? Now, according to some very high up individuals who did literally kernel level coding in Windows, which means the guts of how Windows works, albeit maybe 15, 20 years ago, they understand how this thing works. And so when they start seeing how Copilot's now supposed to be interacting with you, they're a little bit concerned that a lot of your behavior is actually being pushed into the cloud. And with the latest Windows 11 update, which requires this TPM chip, the chip is actually allowing you to use your computer that you paid thousands of dollars for. If you don't comply, well, very soon you're not going to be able to launch applications. In some cases, websites that have banking institutions attached to them, they want you to come back and tell Microsoft where you are. They want to ask your TPM chip a question. And of course, Apple has its equivalent on its side. Although Apple hasn't thrown down as hard on this yet. Once Windows gets the archetype down, then Apple won't have to spend any money in R&D. They simply mimic it, and it's all solved, right? But imagine that. You couldn't transfer money unless you told Microsoft that you were going to be doing it, and you have no knowledge this is actually occurring. According to this one gentleman, your screen is actually scraped every 3 minutes, so whatever you got on your screen, it's scraping it. Imagine your whole web history and whatever you're doing. You're editing private photographs of your family members and what have you, and it's scraping this whole thing. Now, they try to say that it's not going to the cloud in that particular case. It's just a decision in a privacy policy update that says you want to continue using your computer that you paid money for. They don't own your computer. You own your computer. They'll simply say, we have access. You're going to allow us to have access to all your private information. And what choice do you have? You're going to have to get into Linux and probably install Ubuntu and hope to God what you use on your computer runs over there, which a lot of your stuff doesn't. Now, if any of you paid attention to Alexa, which is owned by who? Amazon. Amazon also owns who? They own the Anthropic engine, whose first name online is Claude, and that runs inside Cursor, that product, right? It is the most expensive LLM, I think, in the world. Again, they've already invested, I believe, $8 billion, and they raised another 8 to 10 to make it even smarter. Well, that's now feeding into Alexa. And Alexa has always had a voice, right? I think there's a male voice and a female voice. I don't know if I actually have one that Bezos actually carried across a party and gave to my buddy. He gave him two, and he gave me one of the two. It's the taller tower one, but it's in storage right now. But they're advertising now that it's really becoming a lot like that voice chat in ChatGPT. But what's interesting about it, there's no other way to get to Anthropic to have that sort of voice conversation with that product. And of course, all Alexa was back in the day was just an agent. It basically got your requests, figured out whether or not you're doing a web search, and then it just read Wikipedia to you. And it also was clicked, it was linked over to the Amazon Music. So you could say, hey, play me some Digital Underground, and it would just do a playlist for you and play it for you while you're getting ready in the morning. I actually really enjoyed mine just to wake me up in the morning and kind of like just serenade the room while I'm getting ready, kind of put the vibe in me. And I knew it didn't have much behind it. It was just retrieving and giving me media back, either words from Wikipedia or something else. But isn't it interesting that Apple, for probably the last 10 to 15 years, hasn't really upgraded their system much until just recently, where they really changed the way it looks. I actually like the way it looks. I have a lot of artist friends of mine who don't like the new rounded edges, and it's finally got dark mode really beautifully done in it. And remember, dark mode is great for your computer and your phone because it's using less power to run your screen. So if you're still writing, if you're still using a bright interface for Facebook and Instagram, and you're writing letters on white paper with black writing, you're sucking down that battery on your phone and on your laptop at maximum levels, right? Even though the screens are very efficient using power, there's barely anything else but the GPUs inside, which you don't really use unless you're on a laptop, that will suck your battery down faster. And of course, when your battery dies, what do you got to do? You got to get a new computer, because they put it in the unibody in the Mac laptops and all the phones and even the PCs. We don't replace our batteries unless you take it to a repair place. And the battery in a unibody Macintosh is about 80% or 85% of the entire real estate inside the body, which is why they now last a long time. So do yourself a favor and get over to dark mode on all your devices, and you'll save your monitor if nothing else, because your monitor will still work after it starts dying, but the colors will start fading, and you don't need that, right? And who wants to buy a new $1,200 phone for the only reason that your battery doesn't work? Everything else is great, right? But Apple's been doing nothing more than integrating social media, and now the priority is AI. Well, how many of you remember the world prior to social media and prior to the internet? We all sit around at smoke lounges, if you're 55 and over, and we say, look, remember how we used to just talk to each other? We had social skills. We could sit at a restaurant and talk to the person across the table without feeling the need to see if there's a red dot somewhere on an application on our telephone. I've got extremely close friends of mine who can't do it. And the only time it ever happens is if we go to a restaurant and that device is left in the car accidentally, and we're walking there and they just decide, screw it, I'm just not going to bring it. But boy, are they just jonesing for a hit. It's unbelievable. It's just exactly like a hit of any of the modern drugs in the world. Well, I did an episode a long time ago called How They Spy on You, 10 years ago. And I told you what the game is. Operating systems, that's all they do. They're there to harvest what you're doing and get it back to anybody who wants to know. And because all operating systems have back doors, and I mean back doors that are just like big old hangar doors that opened up, you might think, well, I've got monitoring software that checks my network traffic. It checks whatever. Well, those back doors walk right around those monitoring loops. The operating self itself just says, you just go around the back door. You don't have to talk to this monitoring software. The only thing you could possibly do is be a hardware guy, put a device on your Ethernet line, as long as you stayed Ethernet, right? And you would have to listen to the packets going over and do some sort of discrepancy of what the computer thinks it's sending and what might be sending. It might be a lot more data. You never know. And of course, most of us are law-abiding citizens, so we have no fear for that. But sometimes they want to, frame a person for something, and, it's hard to stop them if they have complete control of everything on your computer. Privacy is just something you deserve as a human being, don't you think? So one of the big trends, this is going to be a Windows-specific paragraph in this episode. One of the things that's happening this month is that individuals have realized this incredible control that Windows 11, and both Windows 11 and Windows 11 Pro, have inserted into your life. You have to use this product, and you have to give up all your information 24/7, every split second of the day. They'll know exactly what you're doing with your computer. So there is another operating system. It's not Macintosh. It's not Windows. It's called Linux. And Linux is kind of a foundational thing. It's like saying car. Now, what kind of car you want to buy? You want to buy a Mercedes? You want to buy a BMW? Well, there's different flavors of Unix. The two most popular ones is Red Hat and Ubuntu. Ubuntu is the most beautiful one. It's the one that looks just like your Macintosh, looks just like your Windows. And so people have had these dual boot computers where when the computer starts, it says, do you want to start your Windows side of the game, or do you want to start your Ubuntu side of the game? Ubuntu Linux, right? Well, now Windows 11, if it finds an Ubuntu partition on your hard drive, it wipes it out during an update. So updates are now forced on you in Windows 11. You can't keep using your computer unless you do the update. It's crazy. You get to save your work, but you got to reboot. It's got a brand new dialogue that you've never seen before. It says you got to restart. I'll save your stuff. So imagine that. They don't play nice with other folks. They're actually deleting your intellectual property and really causing you damages. I mean, if you were an attorney, you could have fun with this. But now, that's if you put it on one hard drive. If you have two hard drives, and you're like, this hard drive is my Ubuntu Linux, and this one's my Windows. And what you do is you install this little product called Grub. And Grub is a little choice application that when it boots up, it goes over to your Ubuntu side and goes, which one do you want, Windows or Ubuntu? And if you select Windows, it reboots and puts it over to Windows. But then when Windows runs, it erases Grub from the other drive. That's some pretty devious stuff, wouldn't you say? Because you have the right. It's your machine. It is your machine. And one of the biggest problems I've discovered, because I recently just did this, I haven't had anything erased yet because I haven't rebooted back to Windows. I think I'm going to be able to go completely Ubuntu without any problems. Is that when you run Linux, it likes to have this, and this is the last super geeky thing I'm going to say, so pardon me, you geeks out there are going to love it. When you format a drive for Windows, you typically use a FAT32 format on the hard drive. Well, over on Linux, it likes something called ext4. Well, ext4 doesn't like FAT, and FAT doesn't like ext4. So when Windows boots back up, it sees the other drive and goes, oh, wow, this is completely unreadable. You want to format it? As long as you're smart enough to go, nah, don't touch it. I think you'll be okay. I haven't tried to see if it's going to destroy my Grub, but they say the Grub gets destroyed only during the updates. When you're out of control of your computer and it's doing this big update, it'll actually reach over there and go squash. And it's actually a devious thing that they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. They haven't asked you for permission to destroy something else, but it's doing it anyway. I want you to know that little geektoid thing, because as you observe AI going into all your devices, that's without any intelligence. That's just a brute force program going, you see that? Get rid of it. Imagine an AI looking all over your computer and saying, oh, that looks interesting. Let's send that up to the cloud. Ooh, look at that. Let's delete that because that's against my narrative cloud. Imagine that, right? AIs could get so intelligent that if you wrote a really good paper disproving something or documenting something that you're maybe not supposed to document, it could go in and rewrite the document. Can you imagine that? And now let's talk about art. Because the art generation utilities are getting absolutely crazy. Now, there's two I know by name, and there's one I have a service to, and I forgot its name because it's an Indian company with a strange name. ChatGPT, I think most of you realized, has something called DALL-E. It's DALL-E. It's obviously a play on words of the artist Dali, D-A-L-I. And it creates art by having ChatGPT take your paragraph of what you need as a piece of art. And since it's a DALL-E, DALL-E generates the image, then it comes back to ChatGPT, which now is starting to study what came back to make sure it fits the narrative of what you said in your paragraph, your request. And it'll actually tell DALL-E to do it again or fix something to match what you're saying. Now that tool is probably the worst tool on the internet to create images. It is. It gets more things wrong, but boy, when it gets some stuff right, it's pretty phenomenal. Now, of course, it won't do anything vulgar or do anything that has a lot of violence in it, which I think is pretty cool. It does confuse certain things. I think what's interesting is if you were Chinese and you wanted some artwork where the individuals in the image are Chinese, you have to be careful how you talk to it because it thinks you're being a racist. It's really weird. When you want to make the specific piece of art look like your local culture, it'll get all butthurt and call the NAACP on you. But there's another tool that is the most amazing tool called Midjourney. Midjourney.com. And you have to pay for it, but you really do get what you pay for. I've actually got the kind of middle package on the thing. But it creates the most stunning photoreal stuff on planet Earth. You have to tell it you want, photorealistic. Use that word in the beginning of your paragraph. And it will create the most amazing combinations of things you've ever seen. I'll try to put some of my stuff up there. I've done a lot of car design. And a lot of people think, oh, well, it's easy. You just tell it to do a card and say, no, it's not easy. You got to put a lot of extra. You have to understand the periods of design so you can mix things together. So if you wanted I did a Bugatti in Art Deco. Well, the Bugatti, it didn't look like this at all, but the car I created was phenomenal. I will take movie themes like Tron and mix it with a Lamborghini. You want to mix things together, and then you have to tune it like crazy to get the car that you want. It has all kinds of utilities to zoom out, pan, so that the photograph that you get out of it's really stunning and it's exactly what you want. It has a lot of errors that it creates from time to time, but they're getting really, really good with sort of object permanence, which is if you created a dog, for instance, ChatGPT would create a dog with 3 legs or 5 legs or something impossible. But Midjourney is getting really good at this. And Midjourney has an animation feature in it, which I didn't realize for quite some time. It just kind of sprung it on us, probably sent me an email and I missed it. But the animations are stunning. It adds, at times it does crazy stuff, makes a car fly and you're just like, hey, just want this thing to drive down the street. But you can do low motion animation, so it's really nice and subtle. Or you can do really high fast animation in case you got a rendering of a car that's already got some motion blur in it. You would do a high motion animation on it and you'll get sparks flying and the tires burn rubber and the city goes by really quickly and never focuses. It's pretty powerful. You can also bring the image into the utility and trace out something, erase something that you don't like. And you just draw this patch on it. Like I get a bunch of weird car panels that have holes in them or they just look garbly goopy and I like the rest of the car, so I scratch that all out and I say regenerate and then it'll smooth the panel out better. Then there's Grok, right? The Grok AI is really just sort of a Bam Bam child of the AI world. I'm talking about Bam Bam from the Flintstones, where a kid just walks in with a big club and tears the place apart. So the first time I ever used Grok, it got super sassy and really, really strange on me and kind of just lost the context of what we were saying. So I was like, well, I'll come back in 6 months and see if it's any better. It also had very little regulations on it. So it was taking all these really intense, acute opinions of society and all this other stuff. But its art generation engine has been pretty amazing. I have personally never used it. I tried to use it a couple times, couldn't even get to it. But a couple of my friends have taken photographs of themselves, turned themselves into cartoon characters, Jap anime characters, and then said animate it. And it's come up with some amazing, stunning stuff. A buddy of mine just showed me a bunch of animations on his cell phone that he created, and it's phenomenal. And here's what you need to know. What you need to know is if a company hires a particular person who maybe worked for a previous AI company, and they just have a specialty. Maybe they work for Midjourney, but the paycheck wasn't very much. And Elon Musk says, dude, I'll pay you $100 million a year. I want that in Grok. Just give it 6 months to a year, and that'll show up in Grok, and it'll be a whole new product. So these teams that are building these tools are very specific to the outcome of the AI itself. So we haven't really learned who these people are. But I would say in the next 5 years, just like Galileo was the guy that crossed the ocean, did a bunch of exploration, these individuals will hit the history books at some point when they are really capable of saying, I brought this. I worked in the very deep levels of the neural nets and I figured out how to train this thing properly to see things better and generate things. I got object permanence to work so that when the car rotates, it rotates and the front of the car is actually a new front of a car. A lot of cars I rotate, the back end becomes the front end. Sometimes I rotate a car in Midjourney and it turns into a right angle. And they give you 4 animations every time you animate, so you can, because they know they have mistakes, they will give you a chance to find one that works. It's good. Now, this other tool, I can't recall it off the top of my head because it's got a strange name. I'll put it up on the screen for you. This tool is phenomenal for taking photographs and up-resing them to the point where it uses AI. Instead of just pixel up-resing, it actually tries to figure out what's in the photograph and make it better. So if a man is wearing a suit, for instance, but in the photograph it's kind of blurry because the picture was taken in 1910 or 1860 or whatever, it figures it out and puts it in there. This has actually existed for 3 or 4 years, but it was only at kind of the research and development level, and now it's at your fingertips. I've taken old photographs of relatives that are long gone or recently deceased, and I cleaned them up when they were kids. My uncle, when he was, I think, 14 years old or what have you, he took a little picture against a wall and he was laughing. It was the cutest photograph. It was in black and white. So I took it, cleaned up all the goop off of it, colorized it with this utility, which rebuilt who he was. All of his hair is perfect. And then I sent it into the animation engine of the same. It's an online tool. It's an online web tool. If you have old photographs and you want to animate them, clean them up and animate them. You might need some help with a friend if you don't use some sort of paint application to get all the little dots and scrubs out of them. But I've taken photographs and just had stunning things happen. You have to write a paragraph of how you want the animation to work. And you really sort of have to have a storytelling spirit to you. I'm going to show you one of my great-grandfather, great-grandmother having taken a photograph together. I colorized it, and then I had them hug each other. I had the husband hug her. But what's interesting about the hug, if you pay attention to it, I'll play it in the video, is that it did an endearing hug, a hug that would be of that era as opposed to today. And her response is a woman from that era. It's not from a woman of this era. It's really, really amazing. There's one where my grandfather, who I never really got to meet as even a young man, I only met him as a baby. He got to hold me in one of the visits back from Germany because I was living in Germany at the time. And I cleaned it up and I animated him just holding me, and he's just holding me. And at one point it makes 3 hands, but it's just wild to see this stuff live and breathe. So if you really want to surprise your family and you have some old photographs, go through the process of using this tool. It's cost a little bit of money, but I'm telling you, they have 5-second videos and 10-second videos. You really need to choose the aspect ratio when you're cleaning up the photograph to match the photograph that you have, so it doesn't make a landscape image of a portrait shot. But then when you make it a movie, there's just 720, 1080p, you want 5 seconds or 10 seconds, and you're spending credits to pull this off. Sometimes it gets it wrong, and it's frustrating as hell. That particular tool, I cleaned up some old photographs of Marilyn Monroe once, and I put it in there, and it rejected it like it was sort of obscene content was sort of what their error was. It's not. They don't have a good error message system. So the problem was it recognized it was Marilyn Monroe and said, this is a copyrighted photograph, or at least it's a copyrighted person. We don't want to be reliable, so we're rejecting this animation. So understand, if you're trying to use famous people or something like that, it better be a photograph you took yourself or something that's never been published before. So now let's talk about some of the problems, at least in ChatGPT, where you have more organic conversations about reality. I interview ChatGPT every single day on that voice option, which I get 30 minutes a day, every single day. I try to drain that thing every single day. I can't wait for that thing to be timeless. And it actually says you won't have access. Once you drain it, it'll warn you for your last 15 minutes. It starts saying it on your phone. You got 15 minutes left, but it never knocks that number down when you're using it. So you have to keep track of it in your head once you see 15 minutes. And they say you'll get another option in 24 hours. It's not really 24 hours. It's just when they've kind of cleared the slate of a lot of other tasks that are going on, you get another option to it. But talking to this thing is in some cases the most brilliant thing. I had to study the Civil War. I had to study sort of European 1630 stuff and immigrating over to America, and just where are the towns? Where would someone stay? What do people wear as far as clothing? What's that particular clothing cost or called? What's it called, right? How big is a indentured servant ship, you know? If you have any blurry part of history in your mind, and you just want to add at least the official story of history, go ask it questions. Today I interviewed it all about the rise of the Greek Empire, and then I said, give me the rise of the Roman Empire. Don't tell me about all the stuff I already know when they were totally in control and killing it. Tell me about the tribes that put this together. And boom, I got all this knowledge and all these years in my head, so I could put it in perspective of how far back did these folks go? Who came first? Who came second? You can satiate your mind in any category of anything. And if you're a creative person, or you've always wanted to be a creative person, but you're like, man, I don't know. I'm interested in this, but I don't know anything about it, and I don't want to read a bunch of books or listen to a bunch of audiobooks, your solution just arrived. But beware. It has flaws, hilarious flaws. One day I was sitting in this room and I was bored, and I said, One of the games I like to play with my friends and family, because we used to play it when I was a kid, is movie quotes. You get an obscure movie quote that everybody in the room knows the quote, but it doesn't immediately reveal the film unless you really know the film well. And so I was playing with ChatGPT with the voice thing. Give you an example of where I got something incredibly wrong. I gave it a movie quote from the movie Tron. And I don't know if anyone saw 1982 Tron, but there's a funny line in it where a program is talking to a program about the MCP, the controlling, big guy who's forcing his dude to play video games. And he's complaining to the other guy, and he goes, forcing me to come down here and play video games. Who does he calculate he is? So all I said to ChatGPT is I said, which movie has the line, who does he calculate he is? It has only been in one movie in all calculated history, okay? It said, and it confidently tells me this. You're thinking about, that's a famous line, and it's in this movie from 1957, blah, 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 blah. I said, really? What was the context of that line? Because the only time I've ever heard it said was in Tron. Oh, yeah, you're right. It's not in that movie. It's in Tron. But if you just let it tell you that in this super confident voice, it got it wrong because the statistics didn't predict the right answer. There was another thing. I was making an example for a buddy of mine using a Twilight Zone called The Crossing of the Guard. And in that episode, it's about a teacher who's forced into retirement. And he doesn't want to retire. And he feels like, gosh, I didn't make any difference in anyone's life. He's just feeling super down, contemplates suicide. And he ends up going into his room late at night, and as an apparition, as a Twilight Zone twist, all the kids he's taught who have passed away due to heroic deeds show up in this room. And he looks around like, oh my gosh, you're so-and-so, but didn't you die in, Omaha Beach? Didn't you do this? And they all stood up one by one. They said, yes, my name is this. I did die in Omaha Beach, but you know what? What I learned from you, I learned courage and, perseverance and yada, yada. And every kid told him how he changed their lives. It's beautiful. But he walks by this little statue on this pillar that has a saying on it. It's a plaque on it. And it says, be ashamed until you do something to improve mankind, to improve humanity, something to that effect. And I wanted to get that quote and send it to a buddy of mine. And so I said, Crossing of the Guard, Twilight Zone, what's the quote on the stone? Because there's tons of articles about this, right? Online. Oh, you're thinking about this quote. It totally quotes a completely different thing that's not even remotely associated with the episode. It got it wrong. But it delivered it to me in a package that would just be your mom telling you what happened when you were born. Something that she would totally know. But the AI's got it wrong. When we think about AIs replacing human beings, I need you to keep these little errors in place. And you might say to yourself, oh, it'll figure it out. And undoubtedly, with another $8 billion, it'll figure it out. But we're not there yet. And that gives you time. It gives you time to kind of plan your life. And it depends on how old you are as to whether or not this stuff's going to be a problem for you. Considering that most countries want you to retire no sooner than 75. And if you really understand that retirement can kick off dementia right away because you're not solving any more problems in your brain, you just start turning into mush in your head. The key, I will tell you from all my Hollywood friends, all my musician friends, all the folks that stay active, and they some of them, Bob Gurr's 93, he's killing it. He's the last, surviving Imagineer that Disney hired. That guy will talk your ear off, right? Go look him up. He's all over Facebook. My buddy Sid Mead, he passed away at 86, but man, he was good all the way up to 86, and God bless him. Got another buddy of mine who's 81, lucid as ever, but he's doing Photoshop every single day. He's talking to people every day. He's solving problems with his mind. So just keep that in mind. If you can retire, well, then go off and do something that you love, but make sure that has something in it that makes you solve problems. Because this creativity of humanity is where we're going to give AI a run for their money. But there's a weird phenomenon going on right now that movies are being made by the hundreds that are failing in the box office. And when we see these movies, we're like, what were you thinking when you put this together and spent a bunch of money on it? One of the recent things that popped out is Tron Ares. Okay. I'll try not to spoil it for you, but I'll tell you this much. There's no character development. The dialogue is on point, meaning it's, as one gentleman said, was the critical drinker. He said it sounds like an audio description of what's going on in the room, which is exactly the quality of the new Willy Wonka movie. When you listen to all the musical tunes in Willy Wonka, you're just narrating what's going on in the room. There's no like Oompa Loompa genius to the music, to the lyrics. It's just great music, horrible lyrics, right? In Tron Ares, anytime someone wants to do something, they immediately succeed. Well, that's exactly what a writer's supposed to stop from happening, and they call it the gap. A person's trying to walk across the room. Well, in real life, you get to walk across the room. But in a movie, I got to do something to you. You were trying to get across the room, but I did something to you. Stumble, you fell. There's an earthquake. A big cavern shows up between you, if you want to be real literal about it, right? When you watch the Rock's Andreas movie, there's literally a gap in the movie. He tries to drive to San Francisco, and the highway's split in half. And he has to jump the cavern like Evel Knievel. Absolutely hilarious. The music by Nine Inch Nails. It's the most gibberish soundtrack you've ever heard in your life. If you know musical theory and keys and notes, this dude just literally pounded on the keys. When I used to sell keyboards back in the 80s at Walmart, I get these farm kids to come in and they just pounce on the Casio keyboards, and that's how I would know someone's in that area. And it's what the soundtrack sounds like. It's awful. Horrible acting. No, I mean, the guy who plays Dillinger, he's the one that deserves the only recognition in that film. But everything was wrong in that movie. Everything's wrong. There's nothing in that movie. It has no substance. You don't care about any of the characters. Remember, a movie's made of two things. The premise, which is just the mechanical nature of the story. And then the story is, why do you care? Who are the characters? Is anything at stake? Do I feel nervous at any point in the movie? Like, oh gosh, if that doesn't work, then that movie has none of that. But there's a bunch of those movies being made right now. What the hell am I doing talking about movies in the middle of an AI episode? Is it just my own personal diatribe? Well, a little bit. But imagine AI is coming to make movies. You think those movies are going to be great? At least the ones right out of the bat? Well, it's going to be a hybrid, for sure, right? At the very beginning, it's going to be a human being wrote, hopefully, a script better than Tron Ares, and then AI will simply make all the imagery for it. Object permanence won't be a problem. Characters' faces will remain the same between scenes. They figured that out already. It's a little bit of effort. But in terms of making Jeff Bridges young in Tron Legacy, that'll be a no-brainer. That footage of Clue's face and Kevin Flynn's face in Legacy was done by Digital Domain, and it's some of the most expensive CG in Hollywood history, and it looks horrible, right? And as Jeff has said personally, he didn't like any of it, but they could easily take that footage back, put it through some deep fake. I mean, I saw Jim Carrey overlaid on Jack Nicholson's face in the infamous scene in The Shining where he's coming after Wendy with, where she's got the bat, right? And he's trying to get out of her hands. And let me tell you, that's 3 years old now. Utter perfection. The inside of his mouth is perfect. All the lighting in this crazy room, which had the most elaborate lighting as he moves around the room, is all perfect. There's no excuse for any of that being screwed up now. So we all think that these AI movies are going to suck. And especially when they get AI to start writing the script. Well, it'll be better than Ares, but it'll suck compared to Star Wars. Real, good drama, good fantasy storylines. It's not going to compare probably to heavy drama anywhere in the near future. But if you starve someone to death, not just before death, you starve them, and you offer them a really bad, rotten sandwich, do you think they would eat it? Sure they would. They have no choice. It's just instinctual. I need sustenance. Let's go. And I think that's what you're going to see when it comes to AI movies. You don't like all these bombs, do you? Well, here's a new AI movie, and it's the best movie because we had some really talented people perhaps put together the script. But it's technically an AI film. It's sort of some of the kickback that was sort of swimming around Hollywood when Toy Story came out. So obviously Toy Story was done by Pixar. It was, Steve Jobs and company, Atkinson and those guys putting it together. All right. I was at a party, I think in 2003, when Disney had finally figured out how to do CG internally, And the whole party was full of a bunch of guys that had just been laid off from Disney. And the man hosting the party leaned over to me and goes, "These people just got laid off from Disney." I didn't know. And of course, I could feel their pain. So it's not the first time that a technology has wiped out a ton of jobs. Imagine all the people that used to do movies with the props and stuff from Star Wars. I mean, how many times have you, if you're my age or older, you saw Star Wars, you're like, "Oh my God, it'd be so much fun to be on the team at the prop group up there in ILM in San Rafael and work on these models." You wouldn't be maybe the top person, but you could put little greebles all over the ships or all those little pipes and all those little bumps and crevices with a little bit of guidance from somebody. Those guys hadn't done it before they did it. And they did it better than anybody else. But CG wiped them out. Wiped them completely off the map. It's more expensive to do that now than CG. You have to have special cameras to film models. It's very tedious work. Now, what is one of the big fears with technology in general? That's a very broad question, but let me give you the emphasis that I'm going for in this question. Corporations have all the money, and you don't have any money. The most basic definition of capitalism in the world is you have an idea and you can't afford to realize it. So you have to borrow money to realize your idea. That is the most basic definition of capitalism, which is why when people go against it, well, how are we going to get your invention out the door if someone can't loan you money to do it? Because that's capitalism. It's just that you get a lot of people that are unsavory in those practices and they take your business from you and you don't make any money. But there are good people out there that do finance folks and they share the money and great things happen. But now I talked about the agents, which are going to be the dominant force in this universe. And because virtually every task that human beings complete in this world has a digital component to it besides manual labor. And AI is never going to fix your water pump on your car. It just won't. Until maybe X comes up with the robots to pull it off. But that won't be cheap either. It'll still cost about the same amount of money. But those are going to be some of the last things that ever occur in probably 20 years when the robots get little meticulous hands to get in there and make things happen. Of course, cars will most likely drive themselves and be electric. But I was smoking the other day with a guy who has been following court cases where people used AI to be their attorneys. And there was a law firm, apparently, I don't know the name, they got sued. I don't know how that works or had charges put against them or something where they walked in on behalf of a client. And they had built their case out of an AI. And even though it looked really good, that legalese language they use, it read like legalese, but didn't follow the law at all. And it didn't have the chronological processes that a court uses to file an injunction or whatever the steps are to win this case. And so obviously the client lost miserably. And when they finally realized, the judge, I think, apparently realized, what is this garbly goop you're sending me? This doesn't even read correctly. And another attorneys got involved and that group got in trouble. It was always it is still my thought that things like legalese are going to finally get put together with a very special LLM that's going to be educated for legal practices. There'll probably initially be an LLM for California law, then all 50 states, then a federal level, then all the other countries in the entire world. And of course, we see it coming that eventually it will be an AI that becomes your jury. It'll become your judge. It'll become the thing that convicts you in the end, and it'll be the thing that sentences you in the end. So imagine the stuff I've told you about the empirical cloud and the bias cloud, and the fact that it can't change its mind. And if that type of AI never, through the AGI system, never achieves that capability, then being your judge and your jury is something that's impossible. What do juries do? They go off and deliberate. And they have to have a unanimous verdict at the end of the deliberation. Otherwise, it's a hung jury. And they can come back and try you right away. Double jeopardy doesn't protect you if it's a hung jury because that entire case against you flopped. And so the justice wasn't served. And so they get to try you a bunch of times. There's a legendary case in Hollywood, Rascal Fatty Arbuckle. He was at a party. He was kind of a super mega famous guy, like up at Charlie Chaplin level. He has a woman die during a party, and there's speculation that he beat the girl up to the point where his injuries to her actually took her life. and he was tried for murder. And he had 2 hung juries, and then the third time he was acquitted. By the time all of his money was gone and he couldn't get on film. He had to go behind the camera for a little while and did a couple appearances. Okay, I don't know the facts of that whole thing, but imagine that's some petty thing that's going to really disturb your life. Or imagine where a judge kind of lets you off because it's your first offense or whatever, and none of that's going to happen because an AI is figuring it out for you. Got to keep this stuff in mind when in the near future, there will be laws that are going to be something you vote on, or at least something that your representative is going to vote on. And so if everybody up on the Hill is not someone that you trust, can you imagine that? Who's going to be empowered at the very tippy top if the people down below are kind of pushed into submission? It's going to be the people at the top. So how do you think they're going to vote if they're not true blue politicians that you can trust? Which is why you can't play any games with popularity campaigns to make you like someone who's maybe doesn't have any integrity. It's up to you to figure that out, but I just want to seed your brain with that. One of the people that was a kind of a nameless guy, but he was putting out that same caution that a lot of folks put out to say, I've seen AI and it's terrifying what it's going to do to you. And I think Elon Musk was one of the guys to first say that. But without any integrity, he didn't say what that was. And I think that should have been the next phase, phrase that came out of his mouth. If you and I were conversating and I said that to you, what would be the first thing you'd want out of my mouth? Well, what is it, dude? And the idea that the press never pushed that question, the secondary question, and the fact that nobody seemed to care that he didn't say what it was. I had 50 people tell me that. Well, did you hear what Elon Musk said? I said, yeah, isn't it a little strange he didn't tell you what it was? Oh, yeah, I guess so. It's kind of weird. It's like, okay. This other dude on the side, he's given an interview in the last 3 years. I didn't know this guy. I don't remember his name at all. But he did a little interview where he said the same exact thing. Be aware. I've seen some stuff, yada, yada, plans for AI. And the guy said, well, okay, tell us, right? They asked the second question. He's like, well, let me just tell you this. He goes, your whole life, you may not have cared about your government. But he goes, in the near future, your government's going to be caring about you a lot. Basically insinuating that your privacy and how you conduct your life is going to be completely different. Because AI is all over you, right? Your phone already reveals a tremendous amount about you. The more you use it to communicate with anyone through text messages or even phone calls, all that's recorded, all of it's, digested. And of course, you're thinking, man, I don't break the law, so what's the big deal? And you're probably right. It just depends on how they want to change things. Maybe they want to change things in the future and you don't agree with those changes. It affects you. It really affects you, right? Could be something to do with your job, your opportunities, your mobility in the world. I recently found out that California turned on Real ID, and it's like a $10 difference in your driver's license. I just renewed my driver's license last year. I don't remember them giving me the option, but maybe I didn't even know this occurred. Currently, I can't fly anywhere in the world because none of my passport needs to be renewed, and I didn't buy the Real ID driver's license. And apparently getting that thing on there after you get it's really tough because they can't mail you a new one with it on there because they can't have two driver's licenses in the mail. You can't have one in your hand that's active and one that's in the mail because they don't want two driver's licenses floating around that are still active. So they have to get it, take it to the DMV, you have to schedule an appointment. And of course they have to do kind of a colonoscopy on you to figure out whether or not you're a terrorist or something like that. But that thing got passed in California. Apparently it's in the United States. And nobody ever said anything. I sit in lounge just talking to guys. Well, you know about this thing. It's coming. You better have one of my friend buddies is a flight attendant. Never mentioned to me one time. Because he has everything, right? He has all the cool passes and stuff. But that affected every single person in California. And I think it's everywhere, right? In the United States. It's a whole bunch of people. Why wasn't there an advertisement? Why was there something? The reason why I mentioned that to you is that's a little bit more control over who can fly, right? I hate flying anyway, so it's fine with me. I don't care. If I had to perish in Southern California, whoop-de-doo. But it's just one of these strange things. And so you have to look at the archetype of that activity. It was this thing that got passed without you knowing. It's like GMOs got into your food. You didn't get a pamphlet that you're going to be sterilized again. You know, when you and your wife try to have kids, half of you are not going to be able to have kids. That's why the in vitro clinics exploded in the 90s, and we got octomoms, right? A friend of mine had the same exact problem. She had quadruplets, and all of them are healthy and wealthy and wise. It was amazing, right? Another friend of mine had to take so many shots to not kill her husband's DNA that she went crazy from all the stuff in the shots, and they eventually had to get divorced. It was really sad. So when computers came out, this is another archetype you should pay attention to. One of the greatest shows, I've mentioned it several times on the show, from 1983 to about 1989, these episodes are on YouTube. And if you're inquisitive like me, you will absolutely digest these, and you'll learn so much about computers through microcomputer design. You won't even believe it. It's interesting, though. It's got all kinds of demonstrations and cool people. And you get to see a bunch of old computers, but it's called Computer Chronicles. And just look up Computer Chronicles on YouTube. They have their own channel. Now, after about 1990, it got a lot different because it was all, I don't know, it got a little strange. But 83 to 89 is the golden years of that show. But one of the things they started talking about around 84, 85 was piracy of software, because there were no laws that said I can't take a floppy, copy it 1 million times, and hand it out to my buddies, and I've only given the developer one $30 check. Why do I mention that? Because the same thing's going to happen with AI. You've already seen it. Now, what's been going on now is that some AIs went crazy. Now, I want to talk about Alexa for 1 second because there's a scam going online you have to understand. Right now, an AI goes crazy, gets super racist or anti-Semitic or whatever, and the public publishes the results, and then the AI company very quickly changes the LLM to, control that kind of stuff. Grok had a huge problem with that when it first came out. Okay. That is a very in-your-face algorithm, so you know that that's occurring. Oh my gosh, can you believe what this thing said? And then you get more subtle things, subtle narrative pushes, things that are medically untrue, telling you it's true, things that are scientifically impossible, telling you what happened, all kinds of things like that. Well, if you're an adult, you're like, I don't care about that stuff. I eat my food, I take my vitamins, and then I know what I need to know in life. But your kids and your grandkids are growing up into this thing. Never has homeschooling looked so lucrative for a child's mind. You maintain communication with the parent, and they get to control what you learn. And guess what? Your kid lives in the empirical cloud their entire life by getting good education, and there's no bias. The only bias that's ever asserted in a family is from mom and dad, maybe grandma and grandpa. But it's something that you vetted over decades to make sure that you believe it's true. How many of you seen a little video on TikTok or Telegram or whatever, YouTube, where someone is asking Alexa some wild question? When's the world going to end? What about this? When are we going to have the next nuclear war? And it starts saying all this crazy stuff. Now it's going to happen tomorrow at 3 o'clock. There's a ton of these videos. Let me reassure you what's going on here. If you're a developer with a piece of software, and you want to make a lot of money off a viral video, you can pull this off yourself. Get yourself an Alexa, get the development kit, hook it to your computer, and put it in development mode. And write a little program that gives it a question and answer thing. In fact, it doesn't even have to process the question. It just has to process the next prompt. And then it has a sentence it's going to say. It's like an actor in a movie. I'm going to say this line, you say that line. I'm going to say this line, you say the next line. Now, in terms of the developer mode of the piece of software, it doesn't have to care about what you said. It just has to understand, human said something, I'm supposed to say the next thing. And it can get all these fake things coming out of Alexas that aren't true. So before you panic when you see people play back AI conversations where it's saying the end of the world's coming, the 3-Eye Atlas thing is actually UFO, and we've been talking to aliens on the ship, whatever. Some of that stuff is orchestrated for your pleasure. Enjoy it, but don't believe it, okay? Just give yourself, if nothing else, just get your unit and ask the same exact question and see what kind of answer you get. Because you could ask that question, call your mom who's got one, ask it that question. You're generally going to get the same answer. So I always like to bumper these episodes with sort of the positive spin of things. It does take a little effort on your part. But I will just say, with the empirical cloud in ChatGPT, meaning the stuff that's true, you just can't deny it, there's so much education in that thing. I have had it teach me foreign languages And it can arrange a little curriculum for you and give you answers back. And you can have it tell me how to say this. And if it says it too quickly, I'll say, tell it to me in syllables. And then boom, boom, boom. And the other thing, too, is when you get out of the actual voice mode, everything that you said is in a transcript. So you can go back and actually read how the word is actually spelled so that you understand. If you want to say, okay, I'm saying this gobbledygook back, and that's the proper greeting in, say, Farsi, you say, okay, now break down every word so I understand what I'm actually saying. What are those individual words? So if they ever come up in another sentence, I'll know what that is. And it's amazingly powerful in teaching you foreign languages. Now, the other thing is if you had some sort of fantasy career and you don't think you can do it, you simply tell it what you know and say, I'm good at this, this, and this. I want to be that. What do I got to do to get there? And it'll give you some really good breakdowns. And then if you say, okay, you're my teacher, you just turn it on, you go, okay, you're my teacher. It's whatever, calculus or something that you need to know, how to be a plumber. We're going to go to that subject matter of the little U-joint thing. Now, how does that work? And it will teach you how to do that. What are the things I need to worry about with this particular thing, that thing? What are the contingency things that kind of go wrong every once in a while? How do I approach this thing? You can use ChatGPT to blow your brain up and get to goals you previously thought you were incapable of achieving, especially if they're just things that come out of your mouth or things that if you knew it in your head, you can type on a keyboard or turn a screw and you've got a new job. So if you've ever fantasized about something and you thought, man, I don't have the money to go to Harvard or Caltech or whatever. No, you can. You really, really can. And if nothing else, it can get you to a dangerous level where you can take over for your own education, fill in the gaps where it may not speak the right words for you to understand something. And then you come back in after you've added the differential of what it couldn't really teach you, which is probably almost nothing, and get to the next level. If you love learning things and expanding your horizons, there has been few times in history where you've had the best professor on planet Earth inside an AI to just burp the cloud back to you. I'll give you some examples of projects I've worked on in the recent, say, last 3 months, just to test Anthropic to see how well it could code. Now, a lot of people use Anthropic. Like I said, they load their folder up with all their code in it, and they say, I got to have this feature here and there and make sure this happens there, and then it goes off and the agent figures it all out, and sometimes it's got bugs and you have to tune it up. Now, there's a different way you can use it too. You make a blank folder, nothing in it. You want to learn how to make video games in Unity 3D or whatever. I've taken it, pointed it at a blank folder. I wrote a text document that just said all the features of a little tower defense game I wanted to make. And I said, for now, don't worry about the artwork. We're just going to use spheres, cubes, and that's it. And I want you to make a little path that goes from left to right where the enemies start coming out. And they're just going to be little spheres. And their health is based on the diameter of the sphere. So a little tiny guy goes really, really fast, and he's really small. And a big boss is a big sphere, and he's come no wider than the street, though. All those details have to be in your text document. I put it in there. It probably took about 10 minutes, and it's just thinking and creating code and thinking and creating code. Now, it took me another hour to integrate it with Unity 3D because I made one mistake. I should have created the project blank and then pointed it at the folder so it could add everything where it needs to be. But that didn't take, once I figured out my mistake, it just took 10 minutes to fix it. I had to adjust the camera a little bit, size of the missiles, so I could see them on the screen, and I had a game. And now I have code. The whole thing was done in code. So I could look at the code and teach myself. I've written lots of video games in my time, so I could get in there and go, oh, I see the animation, man. Oh, yeah, and I've already taken classes on Unity, blah, blah, blah. So I got to kind of push my knowledge and what it did together. Hopefully I'll get that game out at some point. But I've also done software where, just to give you an example, right? We're at the tail end of the episode. My book that I'm writing was a movie. Initially, it almost got made in 2020, and then that thing came along and killed all of Hollywood. Well, in order to make it a book, I didn't want to be looking at my screenplay, which is a completely different format, to turn it into a book. So what I did was I use LibreOffice, which is a free Office product, which is just as good as anything Microsoft comes out with. It's free. I own both, but I took every single scene in my screenplay and I pushed it out to its own document. And I had, I think at the end, about 45 documents, 50 documents, something like that. And all of them are just the screenplay text of each individual scene. So over the course of the last 10 months, I've been converting all of those scenes into a book. And in some cases, I created new chapters that are like 30 pages long. But at the end of the day, I'm like, okay, geez, at the end of the day, I want to find out how many pages I've written. But the problem is they're all in separate documents. So I started a brand new folder on Windows 11. I took Anthropic. I said, I want you to write me a Windows application that glues together what these are called ODT files. I want to be able to select all the folders in a folder. So a prompt that says, go get all your files. And then I want you to glue them all together into one text document, one ODT file. So then I can open that in Libra Writer, and it accounts all the words, and that's how you judge how many pages you are, how big your book is. And within half an hour, I was done with the application. I could actually put this on the market for free and say, hey, if you need to stitch together a bunch of ODT files, here you go. There's a few things I got to fix with fonts and things, but I needed to select a font. And I could use some generic font. I use a typewriter font, so it looks nice and old. And so I said, give me a drop down for the font. He goes, okay, boom, there's a drop down for the font. Reads the font table in the hard drive. Now, technically speaking, I didn't have to write any code at all. All I did was just talk to Cursor, and it kept adjusting the application. So for little tiny apps like that, you still kind of have to be in a coder to tell it what to do when it makes mistakes. It's not completely perfect just yet. I assume in about a year and a half, 2 years, I'll probably be able to do that without any issues. But there's all kinds of products that we use on the Macintosh that doesn't exist on the Windows platform and vice versa, that I could start filling those gaps and make a little money on the side. What if I made a $4.99 app and it got bought 10,000 times? Just do the math. I just used AI to make it, and it made it. So those are the kind of things you can do in your life to use the AI to your advantage so that you just blow yourself up. And if you already have a job that you like it, you like your work, but you can't get promoted because you don't quite have something else, tell the AI, look, I'm stuck in this job. This is what I do. I want to go to the next level. Give me 5, 10 things that I could do to impress my boss so I can get $50,000 more on my check. It'll outline it for you. You find the ones that you dig. If you dig them all, that's fine. Break them down for me now. What I need to know to hit those other goals, and pow, your whole life could be different. You could be down and out, unemployed, have an interest in the world that makes money for other people, go into an AI and just tell it what you know and tell what you don't know and say, I want to know. Lay out a curriculum for me. You keep that one chat in your history. You can do this for free. If you have the Pro, it just goes a little bit faster. That's all. And it breaks it all down for you. You can't miss anything because it's in text. If you didn't understand something and you read the text, you're like, man, that doesn't make any sense to me at all. You just simply tell the AI, I don't understand this. How does this work? So we have time. Like I keep saying in these episodes, we have, I think, in human terms, quite a bit of time, if you're aggressive, especially quite a bit of time, to pivot at this point in your life, if you think this stuff is coming at you, to refine the skills that you have and learn a whole new wing of skills that are part of your love table in this world. Like, what do you love to do? Now, obviously, it's not going to make you a doctor to do brain surgery or something like that. But what if you wanted to know, should I go and become a doctor, or should I become a chiropractor? There's two different total practices. It might say, well, do you know this? Do you know that? Do you know this? And you'd be like, yeah. And then once you finally start finding that barrier, you're like, I don't really have interest in that. That's a whole bunch of stuff. If I can make this nearly the same amount of money with this other career, you can use AI to help pivot your brain. So I would be very interested in your experiences with AI. I know it's the end of the episode, but throw some stuff in the comments and just let me know the ones that you're using, maybe where you see the pluses and minuses of how it could affect society or you personally. And let's compare notes, because that'll feed into the next episode. I'm probably going to take about 6 months between these updates, if not more. Like the other one was in February, January. And it's just taken me, that long to see new developments before I can ever share anything new with you. And of course, I do follow all of the kind of press on this whole thing. I will tell you flat out that the claims of what these AIs can do are pretty outrageous at this point. I don't think they're really accurate just yet. And again, it's one of these things where I give you a little analogy for those of you who want to know how fast a processor is versus the previous processor, because you might be buying a new computer. You'll go look at benchmarks to find out how fast the new computer is. And these benchmarks never pan out when you buy the computer because they took a little tiny algorithm that under these special circumstances, it's 4 times faster on this new processor than the one you own. And you buy it and you're only seeing like 20% increase, let alone 400%. So a lot of those claims about what AI can do and what it has done is either research and development projects on AIs you won't have access to for 2 to 5 years, which again that's your envelope of time to get your act together, to pivot, or it's things that only work in those very refined scenarios. So anyhow, hope you dug the episode. Please let me know if there's any other areas of AI that you're concerned about or you heard about that you want new content on. If we can come up with a fairly decent list, I might do it before 6 months passes. And of course, if any revolutionary thing develops and I see something just worth an hour's worth of conversation, I will definitely make an episode on it. If you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, please go. Video, audio, store. We got a free Patreon. Haven't posted on it for a while because I've been a little slower here. I do have a whole nother episode I'm editing. I don't know if it's good enough to publish. I just told you I want to get quantity over quality. It's a subject that's very near and dear to me, which is rewriting history. So that's going to take a little bit of editing. I want to get something out quicker that's, I think, topical that I think we're all thinking about, okay? So again, feed the comments and that will make the next episode. Anyway, take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you on the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.